Hi again, everyone. This video is sponsored by contribution from Lisa, and here's her story. Dear Ollie, I just wanted to say the video you made regarding Generation X and why Trump won was so on point that it really got me thinking in a much broader context of how the different generations in our country have related to each other over the past decades. I was born in 1984, which is technically considered part of the millennial generation, but according to some sources, the tail end of Generation X. Since before I was even a teenager, my attitudes and mentality have been much more in line with those of Generation X than millennials. The irony is that the baby boomers and millennials seem to have a lot more in common with each other than the generation sandwich in between. Exactly. I mean, that's been my point. My whole point between the millennials and the baby boomers is, look, I was raised, and most of us were raised with a parent in the home. You know, that's how we were raised. One parent worked, the other, usually your mother stayed home, and then had a part-time job, went back to work after you went to school, but it wasn't like what we have now where, you have two parents working, you're never home, you're putting your kids in daycare, strangers are raising your children, or the grandparents. And because of that, because of our generation being so inundated with just trying to make ends meet, because the dollar isn't worth what it was worth back in the 70s or even the 80s. You can't buy as much bread and milk for the same dollar that you could back in the 70s and 80s. And that's how it's worked. And the inflation of the dollar hasn't kept in line with salaries because we don't have enough currency and gold to back it up, and we're not even backing up our currency. There's too much currency now, which devalues our dollar. So when you hear about this drive for $15 and $15 an hour don't mean shit when you're dealing with paper money that loses value. One of the memes I responded to on Facebook was, I think Australia's Big Mac is $4.50, and in the United where the employees are making $15 an hour or $17 an hour, I think was the meme. Making $17 an hour, a Big Mac is $4.48. In the United States, they're making $7 an hour and the Big Mac is $4.60 something or whatever. Nobody's taking into effect why are you paying over $5, over $4.50 for a Big Mac. I wouldn't know. I don't eat McDonald's. I've never was into McDonald's. But apparently now they're over $7 for a fucking McDonald's hamburger. And nobody stops to think like, wait, why does a McDonald's hamburger cost $7 anywhere? It's ridiculous. Because our currency's been devalued. Doesn't matter if you throw $15 at somebody on devalued currency. You're not going to be able to afford to staff your place, or you're going to have to raise the cost so high that it's going to be unaffordable. The reason Australia can get away with it is because I think, there are 10 million people in Australia. We have nearly 400 million in this country. People don't understand that, though. But my broader point was to the economics of why Generation X has two people working all day, and how the baby boomers, because now the grandparents have so much more involvement in the child's life, and unfortunately those grandparents are narcissistic baby boomers. So it's no wonder that our children are acting more like our parents than they are like us. When I say this, I am speaking in very broad brush terms and don't mean to offend anybody of either generation, since there are always plenty of exceptions. Since the time I was a child, I've always related much better to people older than myself than to people younger or even my own age. From very early on, I noticed an obnoxious sense of entitlement and me first type of mentality among my peers that I never quite shared nor understood. I now believe that a large part of this disparity has to do with being raised quite differently from most of my peers. I grew up as an only child with a narcissistic baby boomer bitch of a mother and a father with a substance abuse issues. My father was around until I was 12 when my parents divorced, and since then he has only been in my life intermittently. My parents were relatively old when I was born, with my mother being 34 and my father 37. I'm curious to know if you observed the difference between those born on the early end of the baby boomer period versus the end with regards to how they raise their children. When people stereotype the millennial generation, they use phrases such as special snowflake and everyone gets a trophy for showing up. This was something I definitely observed in my classmates growing up, since behaving like a self-entitled, spoiled brat seemed to be praised, while traits like honesty and general dislike of drama were mocked and seen as a sign of weakness. I often found myself the butt of jokes for being relatively quiet and hardworking, and not being one to start drama just to prove that I could get away with it. The difference that I noticed between my parents, specifically my mother, and those of my peers is a lot of their parents seemed to be more passive and let them get away with a lot more, and they were more complimentary of their children. I'm not saying this is the best way either, but there must be some sort of balance between the two extremes. What I experienced was the polar opposite, where I was cut down and ripped apart for anything you can think to rip someone apart for. You're too fat, you eat too much, you don't socialize enough, you need to exercise more, you don't listen to the right music, your grades aren't good enough, you're a slob, and the list goes on and on. May I also add that now that I am thin as an adult, the eating disorder that I don't have is now the butt of jokes. There is no such thing as right and wrong with my mother, only wrong and wrong. That's the way it is with all narcissists. I mean, there is no right and wrong when in regards to you. It's wrong and more wrong. Now, as far as your question of do I notice a difference to where they fall on the baby boomer spectrum? Not really. Not really. I mean, I haven't really thought about it or looked into it, but not really, because you got to admit, it's not every single baby boomer. But when you see it, and it's a lot, I just see him as a baby boomer. Whether you're on the beginning end, it's the spectrum in years, or the end. I don't know. They all look the same to me. I guess I'm generationalist. It's the new racism. I'll tell you where I think the special snowflake, the participation trophies, where I think a lot of that comes from. It comes from guilt from us, because we're not around to raise our kids. We're not in our houses. We know other people are raising them most of the time. Daycare, preschool. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. We have strangers raising our children, and then we overcompensate because when we do spend time with them, we don't want them to feel bad, ever. It's because we have a harder time bonding with our kids because they're almost sometimes strangers to us, because you spend so little time with them, and the stresses of making ends meet and just trying to have a normal life and make ends meet, living paycheck to, I mean, most people have to live paycheck to paycheck. That's a lot of strain to live under for decades and I mean, for a long time, decades. Some people have to live like Generation X has been living like that. It wears on you. I have realized recently, after doing more research on narcissism as well as the generation demographics in our country, that part of the animosity that I felt from my peers growing up was due to the fact that they were actually like younger versions of my narc mother. She would criticize me for being too quiet and unassertive, too honest, etc. She herself is very much the same type of self-entitled brat that a lot of my peers were growing up, but refuses to acknowledge it. It also appears that her social and emotional development has been stunted at middle school or high school level. Yet she turns around and tells me I'm the one who's socially incompetent. The irony is she attacks me for being too quiet and passive, but God forbid I try to put a stop to her bullshit and say even one half a sentence in an attempt to defend myself. Then all of a sudden I am a diva and a drama queen, and think the whole world revolves around me. It wouldn't even matter if I stayed quiet for the last 20 minutes, as speaking my mind for one sentence can send me over the line from weak to passive to dramatic psycho. Right. So, really what you're saying is here, your peers at the time are children, other children, and children pick on each other. It's just what kids do. Okay, you're picking up on it. Not that your schoolmates were narcissists, there were kids. Your mother's the narcissist because she's the one emulating the childlike behavior. And I've said this. The mean girl, middle school cheerleader mother. I mean, you got one. You obviously got one. Another trait that I observed common to all narcissists is the need for drama, like a normal person needs oxygen, to the point where they will actually fabricate complete bullshit to try to make you upset over some trivial matter. I'll give you some examples from my narc mother. I recently got married, and there were a few people from my husband's family that never RSVP'd, which is partly due to personal issues between them and my in-laws. As a person with common sense, I can see this has nothing to do with me and just go about my day. My mother, on the other hand, tried to make it personal about us, that it was a personal insult to her. She also tried to rile me up, like now it was something personal against me when I don't even know these people. I told her she was overreacting and wasn't making any sense. And then she told me that I misunderstood her and that I was a drama queen for twisting her words. Another incident happened after my bridal shower where I received duplicate gifts due to a registry error at Macy's. Yeah, they always fucked up that bridal reg. I was planning on returning one of the items for store credit, and she comes in and says, I want to go with you to Macy's because I want them to know that they fucked up and I want you to get everything that you deserve. Translation, I'm going to start drama and try to get an unsuspecting person fired and get them to give you extra store credit, even if it's only $10, so I can brag that I did it and what a good negotiator I am. For the record, I went to Macy's all by myself and returned the item like a big girl and got them to put the money on a store card. All without Big Mama overstepping her bounds and starting a screaming match. Well, I'll tell you this. Screaming customers over returns usually don't end well for the customer. They're usually escorted out the building. So it's probably a good idea your mother didn't do it. That's just a side note. But this is about your mother again at your wedding, trying to make it about her, rile you up, cause drama. Typical mean girl, planning at the lunch table to ruin somebody's life, to cause drama. Why? Because they get off on it. That's how they get their supply. Maybe it's just a coincidence, and no matter who you run into, but it seems to me that the baby boomer women are even worse than the men. I think part of this might be due to some sort of identity confusion. There seems to be contradictions in the way they think and behave. It seems like at some point a lot of these women expected rich husbands to be handed to them on a platter and had some sort of fantasy about being the perfect Stepford wife. On the flip side of this, a lot of them seem to have this drama for drama's sake mentality, where they constantly look for opportunities to show how gangsta they are, and they're not afraid to call so-and-so and tell them they're not afraid to march in there and make them sorry. There also seems to be an unspoken hatred for men among a lot of these women. There have been comments made to me by my mother and some of her friends which suggest they don't exactly have the best wishes for my marriage to my husband. Some comments have also been made about my father, which I felt were far below the belt, even considering his own substance abuse and fucked up behavior. they did want to be Stepford wives. They did want to be, you know, that generation of women. They absolutely, most of them did. My mother did. But that wasn't good enough. See, and a lot of them got to be that. But even that wasn't good enough, because I remember growing up, this drive, moms on strike. Remember moms on strike? If you're from, you got to remember moms on, they're on strike. They're sitting out on their front lawns and like, really? Really? Now you think about your mother in the 70s or 80s, you know, you have one of these baby boomer mothers. Okay, I'm thinking about mine and how fucking tough her life was. You know, sitting around watching TV, you know, you run the vacuum, it's like a fucking act of con, like, oh my God, I had to move mountains to clean and cook, or like, and I'm not trying to denigrate it, okay, but you're not digging ditches either. And this moms on strike, it was like one of these jump off points that gave these that gave these baby boomers, women, this entitlement. They're like, well, I want to go back to work, and then, but they didn't go back to work. They impressed that on their kids and their daughters, and they're like two parent working now, two parents working now. Moms on strike. Think about that. Think about that, Gen X. Think about that. Now, if you're Gen X, I know you know what I'm talking about. Think about moms on strike. And if you're a parent, think about that when you're at work, when you and your spouse are both working to make ends meet, okay? Barely making ends meet, living paycheck to paycheck, you got paying for astronomical to have people watch your kids or to spend time with them or whatever it is. Moms on strike. Not making any, you can make your own judgment on that one. Think about that. And society bought it. That's the scary thing. They bought it. And when they bought it, they realized we got them. We got them. We can push this as far as we want it to go. And that's how you ended up with Donald J. Trump, by the way. It's part of it. It's part of the culture shift that ended up with Donald J. Trump. And that's not anti-woman. So don't bring it, you just hate women. Bullshit. Bullshit. Maybe it's a coincidence and a matter of who you run into, but it seems to me the baby. Oh, wait a minute. Okay. About a year ago, I was at a pocketbook party with my mother and some of her friends. They had a friend of theirs at the party that was supposedly psychic. Oh, Christ. Please, here, read this, palm bitch. Psychic. Out of curiosity and the fact that she had been somewhat accurate before, I went for a reading. I only met with this woman for about an hour, but she must have literally used about 8 to 10 narcissistic tactics on me. First saying negative things about my husband, which I told her weren't true, but she insisted that they were because she's always right. Then brought up the tensions that I had with my mother and the fact that a lot of this revolved around my mother trying to break up our relationship. She blamed me for the problem, saying that my mother was only looking out for my best interest and that maybe there is some truth to what she is saying that I refuse to see. Her brilliant reasoning for this comment was, well, you wouldn't get it because you're 30, in a nasty tone, clearly trying to intimidate me. For all the baby boomers out there complaining about age discrimination, let me tell you that it goes both ways. It's obvious why my mother is friends with this woman, since they have similar personalities, and she sees my mother as this Mother Teresa type figure who can do no wrong, and my father as complete garbage, despite the fact she's never met him in person and is only going off what my mother tells her. This, of course, doesn't matter, though, because she's psychic and always right. So whatever she says about my husband or my father must be true. Sarcasm. I don't remember what I specifically said about my father during the session, but it was maybe 1 or 2 sentences max. However, this woman accused me of having unrealistic expectations of my mother while putting my father on a pedestal. This is a psychic. This is a psychic. Dude, you should have spit in your hand, slapped her face, and said, read this palm, you gypsy bitch. Are you kidding me? The fucking your mother obviously told her what to say. I mean, come on, man. I told her that was insane, and I knew that I never said anything even close to that. She then lunged a few inches toward me over the table and said in a very nasty tone, trying to intimidate me, do I need to repeat what you said 5 minutes ago? I told her to go ahead because whatever my comment was, she was twisting my words. She then acted like it didn't happen and started to move on with the conversation. Another tactic that I noticed is that when I would tell her of an argument with my mother, she would treat me like the aggressor because my mother is so goddamn perfect. When I would try to justify why I said what I did, I would back up stating what my mother did or said that started the argument in the first place. She then told me that it was my fault because I let her behave that way when 5 minutes earlier she was accusing me of being the aggressor. The irony here is not lost on me. This is all from a 1-hour session with this woman. I'm no therapist, but I think it's pretty safe to say that she's a narcissist too. Obviously, I won't be getting any more readings from her in the future. Well, she's a psychic. She thinks she can read the future. She's a scam artist. Another example of this type of woman's psychiatrist that my mother tried to sick on me a few years back. She used a lot of the same tactics noted above, mainly the intimidation tactic, where she would try to break you down and tell you what she thought was wrong with you and why your life sucked. Also, you would concede and accept another prescription. The tone of voice and mannerisms were identical, with the same forward lean over the desk and threatening tone of voice. She also went on a rant of wanting to be the best that I can be, trying to tell me to stop speaking to one of my best friends because she would drag me down. Mind you, this bitch barely knew me and didn't know my friend from a hole in the wall. How fucking dare she? She was also the type where if you had an adverse reaction to a certain medication, she would blame it on you and say it's all in your head. Another thing I noticed about these women is that they seem to be obsessed with eye contact. When I say that, I mean in the context of intimidation. Where they will verbally attack you and rip you apart, and if you recoil or look down at the floor for 5 seconds, they will comment on your poor eye contact immediately. It's almost as if they're doing it to add intimidation factor or use as more proof of what a piece of shit you are because of your supposed bad mannerisms. They also like to accuse people of giving nasty looks or making faces that they didn't make. It's like they are so desperate to judge that they will hang on every gesture and rip you apart literally second by second. The reason they do the nasty looks, the faces, the bad mannerisms, okay, is because they know it's something you can't see. And they say, well, you can't see it. I can see what you're doing. It is a total gaslighting, bullying, manipulation tactic. As I'm writing this, I'm starting to remember a video you did regarding the book Rules for Radicals. I'm going off distant memory here, but would say that a lot of these tactics originate from this type of mentality and similar upbringing. That's exactly what I was saying in that video. I've seen the same identical tactics applied by too many people, mostly baby boomer women and some men, across too many situations that I know it can't just be me. After all of the research I've done, it's amazing how quickly I can now spot narcissistic and toxic people. It's like I have a checklist in my mind because the tactics are also cookie cutter. I also gave you permission to use my name. I was thinking of staying anonymous, but fuck that in honor of Generation X. Thanks, Lisa. Well, I mean, you pretty much summed it all up there, Lisa. I mean, you can see how narcissism and the baby boomer generation go hand in hand, and how that has affected Generation X and the millennial generation and our children. Okay, and they continue to this day to gaslight and blame and project all of it back onto us. Is a generation that really, when I say Gen X wouldn't grow up, that is a generation that their women, by and large, never left middle school. Bottom line. Bottom line. So, thank you for your contribution. Thank you for the story. I really appreciate it. Thank you to everybody watching. Please leave any opinions or comments in the section below. And again, if you want your story read on the channel, you have a narcissist you'd like to expose or a topic you'd like me to cover, you know what to do with the PayPal and my email link in the description box. And remember, when you email me your story, please let me know at the top of the email whether it's with or without contribution and what name you'd like to go by. This is Ali Matthews. Thanks for watching. See you all again soon.